Well, good morning. Thank you for being here today. We brought together this press conference to make the following announcement, and that is today Kansas is filing a civil suit against the Pfizer Corporation under the Kansas Consumer Protection Act, seeking enhanced civil monetary penalties, damages, and injunctive relief for misleading and deceptive statements made in marketing its COVID-19 vaccine. Pfizer also violated previous consent judgments with the state of Kansas, in which Pfizer promised never to use deceptive information to market their products. Kansas's case is the first of a multi-state collaboration, with Kansas being the first of 5 states to file suit. Before I go further, let me put this in context. As we all know, during the COVID-19 pandemic, there was a great deal of panic and anxiety. Many people who were elderly or who suffered from various medical conditions had already died when the vaccines became available. And when that time came, when the vaccines became available, every one of us had to make 2 decisions. Am I going to take the vaccine? And if so, which vaccine will I choose to take? And these decisions were being made in a hurry. In some ways, you could say even being made under duress. In such an environment, it is imperative that Kansans making that decision receive the truth. They needed the truth. All Americans needed the truth. And in multiple respects, Pfizer did not provide the truth. Much of the information in this lawsuit came out as a result of a FOIA lawsuit seeking information from Pfizer that still had not been made public. And it was only a result of that effort that some of the information in this lawsuit is available. I urge everyone to read the 69-page complaint that goes into great detail about the specific statements that were made and the misleading nature of those statements made to Kansas consumers. The following is a quick summary of, I think, some of the 4 most egregious examples of misleading the public in Kansas. Pfizer marketed its vaccine as safe for pregnant women. However, in February of 2021, Pfizer possessed reports for 458 pregnant women who received Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine during pregnancy. More than half of the pregnant women reported an adverse event, and more than 10% reported a miscarriage, many within days of the vaccination. Pfizer also possessed information from its own October 2020 study on pregnancy in rats, indicating that its COVID-19 vaccine was likely linked to infertility, loss of litters, and stillborn offspring. Number 2, safety relating to heart conditions like myocarditis. Pfizer consistently denied any evidence of a connection or safety signal between its COVID-19 vaccine and myocarditis or pericarditis. Indeed, on January 18th, 2023, when asked whether its vaccine caused strokes or myocarditis, Pfizer chairman and CEO Alan Berla stated, quote, "We've not seen a single signal, although we have distributed billions of doses," end quote. A signal that he was referring to as a safety signal, which refers to a negative consequence. However, as Pfizer knew, the United States government, the United States military, foreign governments, and others had found that Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine caused myocarditis and pericarditis. Number 3, effectiveness regarding variants. Pfizer also claimed that its COVID-19 vaccine protected against COVID-19 variants, even though data available at the time showed Pfizer's vaccine was effective less than half the time against variants. Finally, transmission. Pfizer urged Americans to get vaccinated in order to protect their loved ones, clearly indicating a claim that Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccination stopped transmission of COVID-19. Pfizer later admitted that it had never even studied transmission of it after its recipients received the vaccine and whether they could say it stopped transmission. After making these misleading statements, Pfizer also engaged in some censorship attempts. Emails revealed that Pfizer officials coordinated with social media platforms to censor any speech critical of Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine safety and effectiveness. It should also be noted that Pfizer elected not to join the federal government's vaccine development program known as Operation Warp Speed and declined that development funding. When asked about that, Pfizer's CEO, Albert Bourla, said Pfizer did not participate in the program in order to, quote, liberate, end quote, Pfizer's scientists and to avoid government oversight of its vaccine development. He also said, quote, they want reports. I don't want to have any of that, end quote. Referring to they, when he said they, he was referring to the federal government. Pfizer's misleading statements contributed to success in marketing its vaccine in Kansas. By February of 2024, Pfizer had delivered over 3.3 million doses of its vaccine in the state of Kansas. This accounted for over 60% of all vaccine doses given in the state of Kansas. This suit is being filed today, and as I mentioned before, it is part of a multi-state effort in which more suits may follow depending on Pfizer's reaction. John.
Where are you filing it, and what other states, and where are they filing?
So this suit's being filed in Thomas County. The other states have said that they would like to announce it. Some of them have said they want to announce it on their own. Idaho is one of the other states who said that we may, let you know.
Thomas County.
Yeah.
Why Thomas County?
So this case is extremely complex. In our Consumer Protection Division, which I should have already mentioned, we have some representatives up here, sometimes files cases, many times files cases outside of Shawnee County. This is going to be a very heavy load, so we wanted to go to a place with a lighter workload. In addition, you want to make sure that you go to a place where you don't have, because of the way they assign cases, the case could be assigned to someone who simply doesn't have the time to deal with this.
Why, this might sound a little pedantic, but how is this a consumer protection lawsuit given that no one actually paid for the vaccine?
Good question. Well, so when consumers, under our Kansas Consumer Protection Act, there's not a requirement that the person pay money out of their own pocket. But this is about marketing products to the public. As I think most people know, the federal government conferred immunity on the vaccine manufacturers for tort suits seeking damages from injuries they received. But that did not free any of the vaccine manufacturers from their obligation to not mislead the public or make deceptive statements in marketing it. So this is principally about the marketing efforts that were made and how they contradicted what the company knew.
How similar are the claims in this lawsuit to the claims made by Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton in his lawsuit in November 2023?
There's a great deal of similarity. Each state has its own Consumer Protection Act. Texas's claims are made under their Consumer Protection Act, so there are some differences. In addition, we have these prior settlements with Pfizer that we are also pointing to in the complaint as additional illegal actions taken by Pfizer. So those didn't exist in the Texas case. But the deceptive statements are the same or virtually the same in the two cases. And I should note that, so you're correct to note, John, Texas has already filed suit. Kansas would technically be the second state to file suit, but this is a multi-state effort.
But the Texas case was Pfizer rather quickly got that moved to federal court, and it appears now to be in some sort of mediation. How does this not end up in that?
It's up to Pfizer whether they seek to remove the case to federal court or not. In order for the federal court to take the case, they have to have jurisdiction. The state can fight removal if it so chooses. I'm not certain, but I believe that Texas may not have fought removal. So it's not at all certain that this case would end up in federal court. Indeed, I think there's a very good chance it will remain in state court.
Without having kind of reviewed the specific claims, just based on what you said, obviously with any medication, there's always a risk of side effects. So your contention here is that not so much that there were side effects, but that Pfizer did not properly disclose those potential
That is exactly correct. So that's why when you hear the advertisements or see the advertisements for so many pharmaceutical products, they disclose the side effects so that the consumer is aware that there are certain risks. In this case, Pfizer knew of multiple side effects, which I already talked about, and did not disclose. And in some ways, made statements that were contrary. It's more than just a failure to say that there are side effects. They made statements saying there are no side effects in particular cases, when in fact they knew there were side effects, and they had data indicating those side effects.
Did other makers of the vaccine, Johnson & Johnson, did any of them have that same issue that Pfizer's having with you?
So we're only bringing this suit against Pfizer. This suit is not against the other manufacturers of their respective COVID-19 vaccines. If information did come to light that they had similarly misled regarding information about the effectiveness or, more importantly, the negative side effects, then we would consider similar action against them. But at this point, we only have the information regarding Pfizer that indicates a clear effort to conceal and mislead. And I think part of this is attributed to the fact that Pfizer decided to stay out of Operation Warp Speed, and so they had less federal government supervision and oversight, which allowed them to do some of the things they did.
I'm not familiar with this FOIA request. Explain that.
So
Who did it and when? And
there were actually several FOIA requests, and I'm going to try to. The name of the organization is a long one, and I will see if I can find it for you, John. It's an organization. Does anyone of you know it off the top of your head? It's about a 5-word name. It was the Public Health and Medical Professionals for Transparency in America organization, and it wasn't a request that was just granted by Pfizer or responded to. There was litigation in there, and they went through a great deal of effort to get this information. Pfizer had a database indicating all sorts of adverse events. This is in addition to the federal VAERS adverse events database. Pfizer had its own internal database, which showed a shocking number of adverse events. And one of them, as of February 28, 2021, its database contained 1,223 fatalities after taking Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine. Although Pfizer did not make causality findings, that's simply a timing of fatality after taking the vaccine. So there was a lot of information in their own possession that didn't get revealed until that FOIA lawsuit.
Well, let me ask you about that, because, 1,000 sounds like a lot of fatalities, and laying aside the question of causality, but given how many hundreds of millions of shots were given, is there a question of proportionality here in that when you're giving out, I guess I'm trying to remember how many shots were given out, somewhere on the order of 500 million in the United States alone. That is a pretty small percentage of that 500 million shots. Not that it makes anybody whose family member was in that situation feel any better, but the argument would be that is actually, if you've only got 1,000 deaths and you've given out 1 billion shots, given the way medicine works, that's actually pretty damn good, the argument might be.
Well, John, that's a public policy question. You're asking whether, in general, such vaccines are a good idea when you know that there's a risk of death. This lawsuit is not about that. This lawsuit is about withholding information and misleading the public. The decision a policymaker might make had he had that information is irrelevant to the lawsuit.
Excuse me. You mentioned the number of doses that were given in Kansas from Pfizer.
Yeah.
I guess in terms of the effects that the lawsuit is going after, do you know sort of the data surrounding that in terms of miscarriages and things like that?
No, we don't have that specific data looking at the 3.3 million and then a subset of events that happen, because again, this lawsuit isn't a tort lawsuit by people who have suffered injury because of the vaccine. In that sort of lawsuit, you'd be looking at, okay, here's what happened to the individual and making causality assertion saying that the vaccine caused this problem. That's not what this lawsuit is. This lawsuit is simply about withholding, misleading, and deceiving the public. A company has a high obligation to be honest with Americans in any situation. And our Kansas Consumer Protection Act is all about that. It's about you do not deceive consumers. And you especially must not deceive consumers when consumers are making an urgent, frantic decision believing that their life might be on the line. In that situation, you have to provide all of the information you have to people, especially to people who have what appears to be extreme risk with respect to the information in this lawsuit, and that's pregnant individuals or people likely to become pregnant. That's what this is about. It's about the failure to be honest with the people of Kansas.
When Pfizer releases a study, they have a disclaimer that this is not permanent, that there are not variables that the results could change with variants or things like that. How much of a shield does that provide them?
Well, in this lawsuit, not very much, because here Pfizer had internal information when they made public statements advertising or promoting the vaccine. And so in most of the allegations in this complaint, there wasn't even something that Pfizer put out there. There was simply Pfizer making a statement about the safety of the vaccine in response to various questions or in promoting the vaccine generally. And they just didn't provide, the study backing it up or any study backing it up.
How much, talk about how much the damages you think could be in this case. And are you asking for a jury trial or a bench trial?
The damages, depend. I think ultimately when you're talking about 5 states, then you're talking about, much greater numbers of people than the 2.9 million or so that live in Kansas. I hesitate to offer a prediction, John, because we don't seek a certain number. It's ultimately going to be, the judgment of the court in that case. And we have not yet made a determination whether to seek bench or jury.
Well, but remind me of what, if I had one instance of a business doing something deceptive and there was a lawsuit, the local district attorney filed a consumer protection lawsuit. Memory serves that if it's egregious enough, the fine could be $10,000. So could you argue that there are 2.9 million Kansans who were, let's say 900,000 or 1.1 million adults, whatever the number is, who were advertised to? Could it conceivably be one instance for each one of those individuals?
It could conceivably be that, and I'd like to, Fran has been the head of our Consumer Protection Division for a long time and has seen many lawsuits and has overseen many lawsuits, not regarding COVID-19, but regarding consumer protection matters like this. And maybe she can offer you some better context looking historically back before I became Attorney General.
When we file a suit like this, we're looking for a change in behavior by the company. That's the impact that we're looking for. So we are always looking for a monetary penalty, if you will, that will change a company's behavior. And you're exactly right, $10,000 per occurrence. Also take into account what we call protected consumer. So anyone over 60, anyone who's disabled, a veteran, spouse of a veteran, those all have an additional $10,000. So you could potentially have $20,000 per, half the occurrences, or we don't have the numbers on that.
Is there, in addition, because he's talking about previous consent decrees, does that ramp up the penalty as well?
It doesn't ramp up the penalty, but it sure gives us a lot of factual basis to be able to say that they knew what the standards were.
Does Pfizer enjoy any kind of, not shield isn't the right word, but I imagine they can point to a certain degree, they had, at least on an emergency basis, federal authorization. Does that provide them any legal protection?
No, they absolutely had federal authorization to proceed with producing the vaccine, but that doesn't provide them a shield against deceptive practices when marketing their vaccine. And that's why this case is a deceptive practice.
In Texas, though, they're arguing that they have immunity under a 2005 emergency something like, I can't remember the title of it, but there was a 2005 federal act that if you were asked to do this stuff in an emergency situation, you were held immune or something. What's your thought on that?
I'm sure that Pfizer, if this case goes to trial, will make every argument they can conceivably think of to try to find some shield, some immunity to protect them from liability for the misleading statements they use to deceive the public. I imagine they will bring many other arguments as well. However, I'm aware of no federal act, no federal law or regulation that would shield them from making misleading statements to the public.
Does anything about, obviously Pfizer makes a range of medications and drugs. Does anything about this lawsuit in terms of the actions you're seeking risk limiting the availability of the products unrelated to COVID-19?
No, I don't think this would in any way risk or affect the availability of other Pfizer pharmaceuticals. And, and let me say, Pfizer is a great corporation that has produced many, many life-saving drugs. And they have done many great things. And the fact that they have done many great things, however, does not give them a get-out-of-jail-free card when it comes to deceiving the public. And we do have prior settlements with Pfizer where misleading statements were an issue. And so we are holding them accountable to tell the truth. That's really all this is.
Have
Yeah.
you or any of the other attorney generals in these suits received the Pfizer vaccination?
I do not know about the other attorneys general. I think whether I've received the vaccination is irrelevant to the lawsuit. It's not about me. It's about the statements that were made to the people of Kansas. All right. Thank you very much.
I did have a question for you on another issue. Are you
Well, let's talk on the way out.
Well,